Hi, y'all. Welcome to Rooted. Thanks for being here with us. We are so excited that you tune into all these episodes. I've said this before, but I am so thankful that you guys are joining us because this has been such fun for me to do. It's been fun for me to sit on the couch with so many of my good friends that I get to serve with their husbands and really with them doing ministry. And so today I have my good friend Angie Ohmstede here with me on the Rooted Couch. And Angie is married to Gary, who is our West Campus pastor. And we're going to get to know Angie a little bit better. In fact, she actually was gracious enough to do a Flourish interview with me earlier in the year. So I know you got to know her a little bit, but we're going to ask even more questions about her because I love her life. It's so interesting. It's so full. And as imperfect as it is, it's such an encouragement to me. So I know it will be to you as well. So Angie, welcome to the Rooted Couch. Tell us a little bit about how you grew up, because I know it was local and you even met Gary in diapers.
I did.
So just give us a little.
Yeah, I was born and raised here in Wichita Falls. My parents actually met here, and so they went to church with Gary's parents, my husband's parents. They were playing cards together before we were born, and then he is a year younger than me, so we joke about how we met in the church nursery. But growing up, I had an older brother and a sister, so I'm the youngest of three. And
now your brother and sister, I know your sister lives here. Does your brother
yes.
live here as well?
Nope, he lives in Claude, right outside of Amarillo, so he's a police officer there. But we're all super close. We spend a lot of time together when they come in town, or we'll travel to their house. And we're all just super proud of each other, so very supportive, very close family.
I do love that, and if you've been over at West Campus, you definitely know Angie's family. Because they serve so well. They serve right alongside Gary's parents. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's so funny. You just wonder, I bet they would have never in a million years when they first started playing cards together, imagine where they would be now, serving in a church of their son or son-in-law with their daughter and daughter-in-law in this church plant that was First Baptist.
It's funny because they have, Gary has two older brothers, and they always joked that their oldest would marry my sister. Okay. They were the same age, and it turned out their youngest married each other. So
that's so funny. I guess they didn't see that coming. So when did you guys actually start dating then?
It was after college.
Was he ever did you know him when he was awkward? Because this is the stuff I love to hear about Gary.
Did I know him when he was awkward?
Was he ever awkward?
I mean,
we probably shouldn't put that on camera.
No, I mean, I don't think he was awkward.
Good call.
I just say he was Gary. He always was like the funny guy, or, tried to make light of every situation.
Makes everyone feel comfortable.
Yeah, for sure. So
everybody knows Gary.
Everybody knows Gary.
So then how did you actually get together?
I'm trying to remember. It was after high school. We were about 2 years into college. I had actually been away from church for a little bit. I had kind of strayed away. So in my early college years, I was just kind of living life. I was working, I was going to school, I had an apartment with friends. And honestly, one evening, I felt God just like pressing on my heart, like drawing me back to Him. And I just remember laying in bed and thinking, where is my Bible? Like I'd truly just misplaced my Bible. I had kind of strayed away quite a bit. And I searched for it, I found it, I held it, I cried. It was a really pivotal moment in my life, and I kind of just stopped and looked at my surroundings and my environment and realized where I needed to be. And so that next Sunday, my parents were in church, very involved. I chose to attend, and my parents were excited that I was there. And I think it was then that I recognized that I wasn't putting the right people around me. I wasn't surrounding myself with godly people, those that could point me towards Christ. And going back to church where my family is where Gary's family was, and him. And so we all just kind of started hanging out in the college ministry, and God just kind of placed us in each other's lives. And it was really platonic. It was friendship at first. And then he went through a hard breakup, and I was kind of the one that was there for him.
Kind of consoled him.
Yeah, because I had seen his heart, and I had seen how much he cared for that person. And so I just wanted to make sure that he was okay. And he was actually at Arlington Baptist College at the time. And so it was long distance. I would call him and just check on him, see if he was okay. And then it just kind of grew. And that's when we started dating.
That's amazing. And I'm so glad you put that in your story as far as just kind of your walking away from the Lord, because I think so many of us have had that. I know for me when I went to college, because I did grow up in such a strong Christian family, but some of it was legalistic. And I remember going to college my freshman year, and I'm like, no one's going to make me go to church. No one's going to tell me I have to read my Bible, so I'm just not going to. And I spent a lot of my freshman year just kind of pursuing the things that I thought would make me happy.
Yeah.
And pursuing the things that the world said that would be awesome. And it came up short for me. And I had a similar experience of not really knowing where my Bible was, but one night just feeling like the Lord was saying, do you remember me? Like, do you remember anything about me? And just wanting to go back to his word and go, I need to know more about you. And finally, I turned what my parents had instilled in me and given me that foundation into something that I craved for myself. And so, guys, I hope that's encouragement to you all. If you do have kids, or maybe you're a kid or maybe as an adult that has taken a different path. Maybe you grew up with a great spiritual foundation, or maybe you didn't, and you've walked away from the Lord. It's never too late. The Lord is always willing and with open arms welcoming us back because of his great love for us. And I know that I've experienced that, Angie's experienced that, and we want you to experience that too. So I hope that's an encouragement to you guys. But back to your story with Gary. And I'm sorry, I'm going to totally hose Gary on this one. Tell us a little bit, because you might have had a little bit of some things that went on with his brothers prior to Gary, right? Sorry, Gary.
I did not get permission to share any of this. So thanks, Ann.
If there's marital problems, you can send me the bill.
So when prior to Gary's breakup, when I had, turned my life around and I was pursuing Christ, we were all just hanging out at the college ministry, and Gary has he has two older brothers, and the oldest and I would hang out. Like, we would go to a movie, or we would go play pool or whatever. And it's now a joke, but he always talked about how, when he had a girlfriend, like, he would always want her to sit in the middle in his truck when they would drive anywhere. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, it's friendship. Like, I just want to hang out. You're really cool, and I really need, these kind of people in my life.
Yeah,
and
good
so
influence.
I would be adamant, like, not to sit in the middle. No hand holding, nothing ever happened. And then it was a couple months later that I was there for Gary and his breakup, and it was very bad.
So these are all the good lessons to learn. Why it's always good to start relationships slow, because you never know.
You never know if it's going to be the brother.
Yeah, because that would be super awkward at the wedding.
And now
really
he's
in life.
married. He's married to my best friend from junior high now. So we hooked them up, and they are
I love that. And
happy,
he's a pastor.
He's a pastor
down in the Houston area. So funny. So when you and Gary met, I mean, I know you guys had known each other, but when you really got together, did Gary feel like he had a call of ministry on his life?
No. Well, I mean, I think that he always felt called to serve, but he was kind of climbing the corporate ladder in retail. So when we met, he was working in retail. As we started dating, and then we got closer to engagement and marriage. He, started moving into management positions.
Sure.
Looking for ways to support our new family. And I would always ask him, are you sure you're not called to ministry? I could see his heart.
Yeah.
He loved
just identified
people.
that in him.
Yes, he loved to point others to Christ. And it was kind of a joke, are you sure? And he didn't know. I mean, he probably did know, but then it was kind of cool how God made that clear for him. He had climbed the corporate ladder. He had gotten himself in a position in management that was rewarding, but he was always missing something, and God placed us here, and opportunities came up, and now he's the campus pastor, and he absolutely loves where he's at. God's really placed him in a good spot.
It's been an amazing journey. I mean, it really has been so cool to watch just the heart of West Campus from Bob and Jerry and our leadership team just kind of birth out of that, and then watch you and Gary and your core team work part-time-ish, for years, just in and out of McNeil and setting things up and tearing things down and then getting a building, and then just the amazing fruit that's come from that. But it's taken a lot of time and effort and prayer and struggle.
Yes.
And I think one thing that people know if they know you guys is how transparent you guys are. That you aren't afraid to be vulnerable. You're not afraid to say this is hard. but it's good. And we're about God's good work. That's why we're here. We want to do this. We want to pursue this, even when it's challenging. And so let's talk just a little bit about your family life, because you are above all one of my favorite moms to talk to.
Thanks.
And you have a plethora of children.
Yes.
So just kind of tell everyone about your kids, and then I want to talk a little bit more about Andy.
Okay. So we have 6 kids total. Cross and Crew are 12 and 13. They just
celebrate birthdays this month, right?
Just celebrated their 12th and 13th birthday. And then after Cross and Crew, so they were back to back.
Right, literally.
They're 12 months and 10 days apart. And I remember when I was Cross was 4 months old and I was holding him, learning that I was pregnant again. I called Gary and I was bawling. I was like, I'm so sorry. And he's like, it's not your fault.
You're right. It's your fault.
Yeah. Turn it around.
Just kidding.
So anyway, we were just both at that point like, okay, no more. So 5 years go by after Crew was born. And we got pregnant with twin boys, Cannon and Coit. And we delivered them at 26 weeks, and they both passed away within 36 hours after that. And then about a year later, we had Ruby Claire, and she's our little sassy Spitfire. She's 5 years old. She'll start kindergarten this year.
Kindergarten is not ready.
Yeah, no. Oh, gosh. I'm just praying that we don't have to homeschool.
Like, really, schools, please open.
Can I plug that real fast? So, yeah, she starts kindergarten. That'll be interesting. And then we have Andy Rose, that's 1.
Right.
She'll be 2 in July. So we are done. That is our last final baby.
Yes. Well, and I don't want to gloss over, because you and Gary have such a ministry to parents who have lost children. And I know it's not a ministry no one chooses to be for that to be their story, but I do love how you have so graciously walked through with other people that go through that hurt, and it still hurts, know, and there's still so much emotion, and that was something we talked about in our first Flourish interview. So I wanted to just give a little bit more time to your journey with Andy Rose, because she, so many of our church had prayed for her for so long because of just the things that happened in that pregnancy that were so unexpected. So I just want to give a little bit of just kind of her story, and then just kind of tie that in with your happiest times.
So Andy Rose, I was put on bed rest with her the summer of 2018 at 20 weeks. And my placenta was abrupting. It was a pretty big deal, but we were being cautious. So it was slow at first. Put on bed rest at 20 weeks. At 25 weeks, I was care flighted to Fort Worth, and I was in active labor. And here they can't accommodate that type of a delivery. They don't have the equipment for a baby that young.
Sure.
So flew me to Texas Health Harris Methodist in Fort Worth, and that was on a Tuesday night, and they were able to stop contractions. Everything was fine. Said I was going to be there until I delivered, up to 7 or 8 weeks, just in the hospital in Fort Worth. But that Saturday, about 4 or 5 days later, I went into labor again, something that they couldn't stop, and Andy Rose was born at 25 weeks and 2 days, and she was 1 pound and 15 ounces. But she was born breathing on her own, which was a miracle in itself.
Right.
But honestly, the thoughts that flooded my mind took me back to Cannon and Coit.
Absolutely.
I trusted the Lord, and I knew that He would provide. He would give me the peace and the comfort that I needed to get through it, but I was just sure that we weren't taking her home. I was so sure that it was going to be the next day I was leaving the hospital without my baby, and then to never look back. So God proved me wrong, and He carried our family through that. And for 87 days, she was in the NICU fighting for her life. We went through lots of ups and downs. It was a huge emotional roller coaster. She had several blood transfusions, scary diagnoses that you're just not sure if she could come through. But at the end of the day, and I'll kind of get to what you're asking for, is my happiest moment is probably the day that we took her home after 87 days in the NICU, just not knowing really if that would ever happen. So it was an ordeal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And amazing. And like you said, I think anyone would go back to the loss, having walked through that, and those emotions just come right back. And you're like, well, this is going to happen the same way.
Yeah, and I think I was numb for a really long time. Gary and the older two boys were here in Wichita Falls, while me and my mom was thankfully there with me the entire time, and we had Ruby Claire with us, and so she was able to take care of Ruby while I spent most of my days and
in the
long
NICU.
hours in the NICU, yeah. And so because Andy was on a schedule and I could only hold her for a certain amount of time at certain times during the day.
You would not want to miss that.
No, it was very stressful, but we were able to stay at the Ronald McDonald House, so you're just in a different place. You feel misplaced. We saw Gary and the boys on weekends for a very short amount of time, because they actually, staying at the Ronald McDonald House, they limit the amount of time you can be away from there. And so there were rules that we had to follow, and it was hard. But I think I was numb at first, just not knowing whether we would be coming home as a
Sure, it's probably that self-protection.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I can totally see that.
Yeah.
And just amazing. And now, I mean, even just, I know even bringing her home, there were big question marks, and is her eyesight going to be okay? What are these forward? So how is she now?
She's perfectly healthy. She had injections in her eyes. They had diagnosed her with I'm going to get this wrong, retinopathy of prematurity in her eyes, in both of them. And it was so bad they had to do the injections at a certain gestational age. And then there were several follow-ups. And it got to a point where they were like, okay, we probably have to do surgery again. And this is after we had already brought her home, and about a month later. And then they said, let's just see how the next 2 weeks go. We go back in 2 weeks, and everything was completely gone. And it had all corrected itself. And they said, we don't need to see you for another year. So God has been so good. And I really think that we experienced a lot of restoration in that after having Cannon and Coit and seeing what could happen.
Right.
So it was definitely needed.
Well, I think you guys are such a good testimony, too, to the goodness of God when things turn out the way you want them to and the way we pray for them, and the fact that He's still good when they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even in those dark places where we have a million questions, and I'm sure you still do, but just trusting in His goodness and His faithfulness, and the fact that He continues to walk alongside you, and it doesn't change His character.
Right.
And I've seen you guys both walk through that, and I think that is also such an encouragement to us that get to kind of look in on your family. So I want you guys, you and all your personalities, you and all the things you do, just share a little bit too about what you do besides being a mom, being wife to Gary, because what you do is so cool, and I want people to know about it.
I am a Chief Operations Officer at Texoma Community Credit Union. I've actually worked there for, it'll be 17 years this summer. Yeah, 17 years. I started out as a teller, and I honestly just didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
That was when I was in college, and just had no idea what direction I was going. So I thought, well, why don't I just apply to be a teller? It'll put me on a path of some sort.
Sure.
And it did, and I really love what I do. It's a busy job. It's not just 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. It's lots of evenings and working late. My choice.
Sure.
It's not. There's no pressure, but it's just that I love what I do.
Right. Yeah. And I love that, and I think that's good. And we've talked about this in other interviews, that I think it's good for our church to see that our ministers have families that are also pursuing careers and dreams and families and different things like that. And just like Gary's job is not 8 to 5, 9 to 5, neither is yours.
Right.
And so that's this constant balancing, plus balancing 4 very active kids, and having both of your families in town, and just all of those things. But it does make a very messy but beautiful life.
It does, but we have a really good support system. I think that if we didn't have so much family here, it might be different.
Right.
It would be more stressful and a struggle.
Sure.
But we just were able to make it work. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad. So a couple things that I just want to touch on, just because really I love Angie and it's super fun to talk to her. Okay, so last year, when was the burn? Because this is another thing. Okay.
It was just this past December.
Okay, so this past December, Angie had a little bit of a cooking mishap, and it was nothing to do with the recipe she was cooking or anything. It just is what happened. And so tell them a little bit about what went down. And
so there's this amazing, delicious recipe that a lot of us, I think, here at First
We do. We have it. It's amazing.
We've cooked it, or we've made it. We've eaten it several times. So
and let me just plug, it's from Apples of Gold. And if you guys watch Brenda Howard's interview, you know that this is the ministry that she does.
Yes.
And it's an incredible ministry.
Yes.
She gives amazing recipes. They all do.
And I still use the cookbook. I still use all the recipes.
Just maybe not that one, right?
I have not used it since. But there's a recipe for roast, and it's actually a recipe. The premise behind it is loving your husband, and this is the meal that went with that devotion or with that study. And
so
it's
you
a
were
roast. I was loving my husband.
Gary.
Yeah, and it was on a Sunday morning. I was going to prepare it to have it ready for after church. So I'm part of the recipe is that you sear the roast in some oil, just a little bit of oil before you put it in the oven. And so I had the oil heating on the stove, and I was prepping the roast with the flour and whatnot. And I I know this is what happened. I let the grease get too hot. So when I went to set the roast into the pan, it popped me just a little, like bacon grease would pop you. Well, I just reacted. And so when I reacted and let go, the roast plopped down into the grease, and it just literally sent a tidal wave of grease onto my hand. And so I just remember doing like this and it running down. And then I looked at my hand, and I won't get graphic, but it was burnt really bad. And so
your hand also went down.
my hand also hit the floor. So I holler at Cross and crew were still there, and the girls.
Yeah, because Gary's at church getting ready.
Yeah, the girls were luckily in the bathtub getting bathed right before church, because that's our life. And the boys were still sleeping. So
this is normal. This is what happens.
Yeah, this is normal. I holler for the oldest, Cross, and I said, Cross, and he comes in. He's like, yeah, and I said, call Dad. I burnt my hand. It's really, really bad. And so he calls Gary, and Gary's like, hey, Barb, my mom, can you go check on Ange? I think she burnt her hand. And he's thinking like my flat iron or something.
Yeah, like, really? Are you calling me on a Sunday morning for this?
I know. So my mom starts heading this way, and then he's like, wait a minute. Would she call me if she burnt her hand on a flat iron? And so then he FaceTimes Cross, and he says, take the phone to Mom. I need to see Mom. And as soon as he saw my face, because it was the most painful thing I've ever felt in my life. As soon as he saw my face, he was like, oh, I'm on my way home. So he comes home, he takes me to the ER. We spend some time there. They give me a lot of pain meds. In the meantime, Gary's really good friend, Aaron, is at our house finishing off that recipe for us so that the roast didn't go to waste. So we come home. I'm on a lot of meds. I'm
pretty doped up.
I'm very doped up. Well, I feel like the day goes on and on and on, and I'm like, this roast, where's this roast? And I thought maybe it's just my meds, and
it's
only been
take 3 hours to do this roast.
Yeah, it's like 3 to 4 hours in the oven, in a Dutch oven. And so eventually the meal is prepared, and they bring me a plate. I'm on the couch, and they're serving me so well. And I start eating this roast, and it's terrible. It is the worst roast I've ever tasted in my life, and I'm thinking maybe it's just me. It's just not my tasters off. It's the drugs.
The meds are doing something.
I don't know. But I ate it because I knew I needed to eat. I hadn't eaten all day, and a couple weeks go by, and that same friend was at our house, and he mentioned something about a terrible roast recipe, and I was like, "What recipe?" And he said, "The one that you were trying to make." And I said, that is a really good recipe. But then it clicks, like everybody else thought it was awful too.
That's hilarious.
And so now we laugh about it, and we still haven't used that recipe because I'm a little bit scared to do that. But
it kind of brings back some scary memories. But I have a feeling it probably has to do with the hours and hours and hours it was cooked.
Yeah. It was
over the allotted time.
It wasn't the recipe.
Yeah, it was not the right recipe. Oh my goodness. Well, and you've just gone through, and that went through skin grafts and just tons of time in
my skin graft and my tan line, because I have to keep it covered in the sun and stuff. So.
Yeah. So just lots of things in your life, Angie, that you have had to walk through. Things that you wouldn't necessarily choose to.
Yeah.
But like I said before, and I want you guys to hear that Angie has weathered these storms very well. Not perfectly. None of us do. Yeah. But very well. And I know that what I love about Angie is that she is so willing to talk to people where they are and meet you where you are. And so if you get an opportunity to get to know Angie, I would encourage you to, because as you could just hear from just a little bit of her story here, she authentically loves the Lord and truly feels like she has the opportunity to serve him through loving people. She's not called vocationally in ministry, but she serves so well. and is such an asset to Gary and to our entire church. So before we finish, I just want to finish with our last question, and it's always that question of what roots you. And I think people have heard just lots of different storms you've had in your life, and things that could have cratered you, and times in your life where you've chosen to walk away and maybe chosen to do things a different way, and then come back to God's goodness and Him. So what have been the things, or what is the thing that really has rooted you through all of life?
You know, I would have to just say that it's my faith in Christ. He's allowed me to go through so many different things that in those moments or those trials or whatever it might be, He was able to show me that He's still there and that He is good, and that my faith in Him is what carried me through. My faith isn't perfect, and on a daily basis, you know, we tend to go the wrong direction, make the wrong decision, say the wrong thing. You know, we all live sinful lives, but my faith is what points me back in the right direction when I stray away, and it's what pushes me through the most challenging times. So,
yeah. And I can just see all these different, you know, major or minor things in your life that you've had to walk through, that they really have increased your faith, and it brings you back.
Yeah.
That God is good.
Yeah, and I think just knowing and having gone through those things and seeing that God can carry you through those things is what reminds me when I face challenges or anything in life, whether it's, did I make somebody mad? Did I, you know,
Sure.
Did I say the wrong thing? I remember that God is good and God is still there, and He knows who I am. He knows my heart and my purpose. And so that's what I tend to fall back on.
Yeah, that's so encouraging, because really you've weathered storms that people would probably go, I couldn't live through that.
And there were times that I didn't think I would.
Sure, absolutely. And I think everyone would feel the same way, but just that seasoning it and pressing in, even when it's so hard.
Yeah.
So I think you're such a great example. And y'all, I know you've enjoyed getting to know Angie a little bit better. Thank you for joining us this week, and we will look forward to seeing you next time.